Are you nervous about what the school year will be like? Leaders are doing their best to figure out how to lead through unprecedented crises, with mounting challenges daily. To say COVID has disrupted our routines, that's a truth that many parents, organizations, youth are feeling. And as we're experiencing these crises and dealing with them in our work routines, in our school routines, and even at home. Today, we're talking about these challenges and exploring the impact of COVID pandemic on children and parents, learners and workers, and even organizations. It's really important to talk about schooling and childcare because parents are scrambling to figure out how to work remotely, how to support their children's distance learning, and we might just be doing this for a few more months. Or are parents having to figure this out for the long term? Who knows? We have two guests joining us this morning who are going to help us figure out some of these questions. Today's guests are Mayra LaSalle-Kaplan. She's the Director of Crisis and De-Escalation in New York City Schools, and Dexter Singleton, the Director of New Play Development at TheatreSquared in Arkansas, and he's also a dad of two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds, the 30-minute conversation with leaders of mission-based organizations. Our viewers tune in from all across the globe, and today we're going to have a really lively conversation, so please be sure to join in. My name's Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and creator of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. I'm joined today by my two amazing co-hosts. I'd like to bring on Cynthia Rojas. Welcome, Cynthia. How are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you, Rebecca?
Wonderful.
I am Cynthia Rojas, and I am founder and principal of 2 Year Growth.
I'd like to bring on our other co-host, Peter Blakely.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. I am Peter Blakely, the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting. Today, we're exploring the social, emotional, and educational challenges related to COVID, affecting children, parents, and organizations. So I want to make sure everybody has their cup of coffee and is ready to join our conversation in the chat. Joining us today is Dexter Singleton, professor at the University of Connecticut and the Director of New Play Development at TheatreSquared in Arkansas. Good morning, Dexter.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And our next guest is Mayra LaSalle-Kaplan, Director of Crisis and De-Escalation in the New York City School District. Good morning, Mayra.
Hi,
Good
Mayra.
morning.
Hi, Dexter.
How are you?
Good morning.
So let's begin with Dexter. Dexter, please tell us, what is it like for you and your family in the early days of this pandemic?
Well, being a theater worker, we were at the time in the middle of running a show at our theater, and basically it was midweek, and we started to get a trickle down that, theaters are going to be closing. A lot of people are going to be shutting down their shows. We should be prepared for that. And literally, actors showed up at the theaters to perform that night, and we told them that that would be the last show of the run. And that we didn't know how long it was going to last. We hope we could pick up in a minute. We'll see. And then obviously shutting down that night pretty much became the end of the run for our company and for lots of theater companies around the country. So it was an immediate shift at home in my family. And also, with classes obviously at UConn, that totally shut down too. Luckily, we were on spring break at the time. And so we had about 3 days notice as professors to be able to switch gears with classes and prepare students for online work for the remainder of the semester. So my wife works at Smilo in New Haven and Smilo Cancer Hospital. And so she went the opposite, right? I had no work, and then she went from being, essential and working on a plan for the hospital, how to move workers and how to, prepare for as many COVID patients as possible and planning of that. So then I became the main child care, caretaker in the family of the children because they weren't in school immediately. They weren't in daycare, and I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old boys. And so that became my main role, and I had to just find a way to make it work to still teach my classes online and do whatever other work that I could until it was safe enough for us. Once my mom had been quarantining for 2 weeks, it was safe enough for us to bring her in, and then she came in and helped. But without my mother's help, who only luckily lives about 15 minutes away from me. Without her help, I don't know how we would have done it. 2 full-time jobs, and being able to give the kids what they need in the structure that just wasn't provided at the time by school.
Wow. Now, as you began to see this become more of a long-term situation, how did you settle into this new way of working? That's really difficult.
Yeah. Obviously students at my university role as professor, students had a hard time getting on with it. Theater is not naturally something that is supposed to be, that can be done or should be done, right? Just online, because you need that personal interaction. And that's what makes theater. It's live and it's immediate, and you're missing that. And now it becomes more of a TV and film or recorded genre at that point. And then in my work at the theater, at TheatreSquared, we have had to shift to a total, online presence, because as a theater, we have staff. We want to keep the staff employed. And to be able to do that, we've got to be doing programming, because in the theater, if you're not producing something, there's no income coming in. And so, but also we're the industry where people might feel the most unsafe, right? Sitting in close quarters, people projecting, sitting in an enclosed space for a long time. So at TheatreSquared right now, we're producing a play festival, but the play festival is all online. We have artists who are working all over the country, coming together and working on plays, and we're presenting this festival and rolling these out on various weekends, on various social media platforms. And so that's what we've been doing, trying to figure out how to live stream, how to have actors literally perform in their home, and then be able to live stream that or get that out. And then just figuring out whatever way we can to just get something going that people feel safe to be able to go to. We were the first industry to shut down, and unfortunately, we'll probably be the last to fully reopen.
That's amazing. So you're acting in your home with fellow actors and making one big production. That's unbelievable.
Some of the creativity.
We send the kids to actors, the camera, the ring light, the background drop, and then they just do it all from home. And then we're learning as we go too about how we can, how you use multiple devices to be able to communicate with actors during a live presentation. So actors will be able to receive text messages, be able to see DM messages or chats, and kind of how you do that. And still be able to work. So we're creating our own industry now as a means of survival for entertainment.
Wow. You're innovating. That's awesome.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Learning everything about Zoom.
So if I can interject, Mayra, you're working in New York City schools. And so my question is, for New York City, what's the plan for reopening schools? Because although Dexter has 2 little ones, schools are thinking about innovative ways to deliver instructions. Can you tell us what's happening in New York?
So we have something called blended learning, and it's really distant learning, right? It's we have given parents the options to choose from like 5 different models. And they're all going to be on rotating basis. So the kids are not going to be in school every single day, which is a concern. It has its, flaws and its positives. So it's going to look like one model, for example, will be the ABC model, and it will be A goes to school on Monday, B goes to school on Tuesday, C goes to school on Wednesday, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the other model would be like A goes to school Monday, Tuesday, B goes to school Wednesday, Thursday, and C goes to school Friday and then Monday. There are challenges with that, because what happens to all the Mondays, right? That we have holidays, right? So it feels like Group C is getting the short end of the stick, as to say. But it does have its advantages where teachers are able to assess. That assessment piece is going to be there, because they'll be able to assess, okay, so here's what that particular student needs. And so I'm able to catch up with him or her, when we meet again. And so that portion is there to give parents, the option. Okay, that sounds okay. The other option, the other positive is that there's opportunity to reteach, right? So whatever student doesn't get on Monday, they're able to get on Tuesday. That's for that model. Not all models are going to be able to have that opportunity.
I think that's important to recognize.
Yeah. But it also has to do with the numbers. So like a school of 4,000, that's going to be a little bit more challenging, right? Because it all depends on how many parents choose remote learning. And then what we do is we subtract the students that are going to go remote learning, and those the remainder are the kids that we're going to actually program for distant learning and for blended learning. And so that's a challenge for a school that has 4,000, not so much for a school that has 500 students and 250 parents decide they want to keep their kids at home. So now we're only dealing with 250 kids that we have to program. So, it has its challenges and it has its benefits.
I wonder if, Rebecca, if I can ask a follow-up. Dexter, is it more challenging to deal with what I'm defining as numerous disruptions, which is what this blended model has the potential of doing? Like Monday, Tuesday, the kids are in school and then they're home for 5 days and then they go back. As a parent, as a leader, as someone who is also managing multiple other things, is it better to have a consistency, or do you think the time away helps leaders to at least be able to focus for a couple of days alone? What do you think these models are doing to parents who are leaders and employees?
Yeah, we were just able to get our youngest son, who's one, consistent childcare that he just started last week. And it made a big difference because he was in another daycare and it shut down because they couldn't afford to come back. And that's the other piece, is how many small daycares, home daycares, right, are just totally shutting down because they can't afford to come back. But we were able to find him some childcare, and it made a huge difference, right? When both boys were out of the house, my older son was able to go to the same place as well until he's able to start school. And it made a huge difference, right? We both felt like we could breathe, we could get our work done, because you're always splitting focus, right? You're still with young children this young, you're still doing naps. I have a baby, basically. It's a toddler, but still really a baby. Feeding times, making sure they get naps, all those sorts of things that totally interrupt and break up the day. And then there's siblings, so you have sibling rivalries and boo-boos and crying. All those things that have to constantly break. So it's like a stop and restart, stop and restart, stop and restart. So my wife and I have had to kind of figure out, where can you find quiet space? How can we work together? How can we split it so that I do the naps this day, you do the naps tomorrow, I do lunch this day, you do nap. But so getting everybody out of the house obviously makes that more, just easier, right, on the work day and the schedule. I'm really, it's tough to not be able, in any situation, to not be able to get that 4 or 5 days a week. So with the hybrid model, we have to, as parents, feel like we have to get them in some structured activities and learning on those days that they're not in school. And so then that's the piece that becomes the most complicated, because you want them to be interacting. So then you start to say, okay, should we create a pod or a bubble? And that's what a lot of parents have been talking about, that 3-4 kids together, getting at a location, whether that be indoors or outdoors, that they're all doing structured learning, because that's the piece that's become tough, is that they need the socialization. And at the age that my kids are, the socialization is really more important than the actual, than the ABCs and the numbers and the learning pieces, because that's it. It's play, and it's structured play that they need with friends.
I think
that routine too. Having that routine, consistency.
Routine, absolutely.
Because what we're seeing is all of these systems, our educational system, our socio-emotional learning system, and our childcare system have all been intertwined in various ways, and we weren't fully aware until we lost this major resource of all the different ways that families and communities are being called on to, plug these gaps.
Yeah. Well, I think I see Mayra nodding her head. Do you want to talk about the
But the
socialization?
SEL piece. Yeah.
Well, that's a really big piece for parents, and it's a little difficult because we have a lot of parents that are working parents, right? So one of the things that my team and I are planning on doing this year is continuing with our restorative circles, even if we have to do it virtually. So what we decided was that we were going to come on as guests just to continue to entice students, to talk in their circles about their feelings. The social emotional piece, sometimes it sort of stays in the back end, and not realizing that it's really important that kids have missed that piece for almost 5-6 months. And it just goes together with instruction, so like when I teach parents, to sort of deal with their kids and deal with the whole situation, the one of the things besides teaching them to look at the signs, the signs for illness, the signs for withdrawal, which is really important because that withdrawal piece means that they're not getting enough socialization. And so they're like, well, I feel so alone. I have nobody to interact with. So just, my recommendation to parents is just to stay on top of the socialization piece. Whatever educators have already started, just continue to be that linkage between them, just that not to disconnect, to stay connected. And I know it's been difficult for everyone in the household, but that piece is really important to continue going on so that they're enticed to really want to learn and log on to Zoom or log on to Google Docs to continue to, participate in their instruction. But that socialization piece is really, really important.
And we have to recognize that this is stressful for children too. I mean,
Absolutely.
for a 1-year-old or a 3-year-old, and I would say especially for an adolescent, being suddenly yanked from their routine and their social settings is upsetting, and they see that their parents and families are stressed.
And that's just for kids who haven't even experienced trauma. Like I deal with a lot of kids who have lost siblings or have lost friends or have lost parents. And so, that piece they need that piece also because they've suffered trauma. So they're like triple to the extent, really stressed and stuff like that about not being able to see their friends. And then we have kids who are afraid, because if they've lost a friend, they're like, I don't want to die, so I don't really want to hang out. And that's where we start to see the withdrawal. And so you really want to keep those signs and just continue to check on those signs and continue to check on your kids, especially for the older ones.
Mayra, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I want to pick up on a couple of things that you're saying. Now, 4,000 children, that's a lot of children in a district. That's a lot of students to have to manage. And if you have children who are experiencing trauma, you're going to see numbers significantly higher in a bigger community than you would in a smaller community. And all of that, those experiences those students have, those special services like social workers and special education services and literacy interventions, how are the school districts still providing those critical supports to students who are, really, really need them to be successful in school from a distance perspective? Because some of those students might be learning at a distance and not going back to the classroom.
So, like I said before, I have a school that has 4,000 students, just one school. And we have about 50% who have chosen from that school who have chosen to stay remote. So we have the social workers and we have the guidance counselors. So this school has about 25, 30 counselors. So every day I continue to, train them on new things, on what they can do and speak with the kids about. And so it's all being done right now. When it was done from March to June as a virtual component, face to face. It's going to look like if they had a group session of 5 or 6, it's going to look like the group is now 2 to 3 because we have to do the social distancing within the classroom and within the offices. But we are going to continue to provide those services for the students because they do need it.
Well, thank
Oh,
kids in school myself, and those services are vital for every child. So I have to applaud you for figuring out how to offer those services and those interventions to families because they're so vital.
Thank you.
so I have a question. Dexter, you are not only leading a nonprofit and going through this yourself, but you also have staff or you work with actors. And from a leadership perspective, what can leaders do to support the staff they have during this time who are also dealing with the same thing?
Yeah, I think this is really, the pandemic has really shown what companies really care about their workers. Because I've spent so much time talking to other parents about this who are saying, oh, I've got to go and pick my kid up, or I've got this, or I've got to have my kid on a conference call. And we've seen, all of us have seen, right? Okay, these are jobs that are compassionate to it, and these are ones that are not. And so I've always tried to make sure, and we have an environment at TheatreSquared, one where it's always been, a family first environment, a work-life balance. And that's what I love about it, because it's a theater that even before I started working there and was just freelancing there, it always seemed to care about family first. But I think as a leader myself, it's important to be compassionate and to be empathetic. I think we found that with the pandemic, a lot of jobs that we thought were in the office, work 90 hours a week or what have you, we've seen that those jobs can be done at home. In a lot of cases, productivity did not go down. And so that's hopefully a way that jobs being more remote, being more family oriented will hopefully last. And there won't be a need to have to go into the office. But I think just understanding that, hey, a person going to pick up their kids or a person leaving work early, it doesn't always mean that they're slacking off or that they're lazy. And that's been, unfortunately, a myth that we've held in America for too long, because we don't often see that in other countries, right? We see more balance, we see more time off. But here in our country, it still seems to be, right? If you work yourself to death, then that's really proves that you want something. And that really proves you want to achieve the American dream. When in fact, right, work-life balance and having your kids and family come first really is the most important thing that's going to make you the most productive worker. And so we're realizing that and trying to keep that in the forefront, and myself and the other leaders that I'm working with at TheatreSquared, and hopefully, other industries are seeing it the same way.
That's, you highlighted something that's really important, is that our society really applauds hard work, working long hours, staying at the office, and that the mind shift also has to happen. That because those days are not coming back for a long time. Yeah. Mayra, you lead a team. What do you do as a leader for team members who have family members that they have to take care of, whether they're little ones, school age, or even the elderly? A lot of people have their parents moving back home.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
My director, as it is, she has a 2-year-old. So luckily she has the compassion and the empathy that she allows us the leeway to do what we have to do with our families. That's really important. And it's really important that you said that, Cynthia, because you're right. Society does applaud people who work extra, who are in the office till 8, 9 o'clock at night. And so this was a really, really big shift for upper management to say, okay, they can do this from home. And at first it was a little difficult, they were micromanaging, but then they realized that the work was getting done. And I told my team, I said, we just have to continue doing what we're doing. We just have to continue to train the people that fall under us, and just give them the opportunity to do what they do best. For the counselors, it's the counselor. For the clinicians, is to do what they have to do. And for the teachers that we trained, is just to continue to practice even remotely all the de-escalation techniques that I've taught them because, kids are kids and they might be disruptive on the computer too. But just to continue to use all the skills and the self-awareness skills that I taught them, and getting to know their kids at a different level, right? Because now they're getting to know their kids in a different aspect, right? In a different era. So,
Yeah.
It's
We're
been
all
challenging, but it has been done. I think my team and I have proven that we have done a good job conducting trainings virtually and meeting all the stuff that we have to meet and all our deadlines.
I
Wow.
appreciate your point, Mayra, that you're getting to know your kids on a different level. I think
All over again.
we are all getting to know each other on different levels.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
we're in each other's houses all the time. And a lot of the myths that we maintained that, when we were at work, we were only working, or that, our work life could exist separately from our family lives. We can't maintain that anymore. And I think that that's an interesting opportunity in the history of work.
So, there are some good things that are going to help leaders during this time. One, the last 4 or 5 months have given us an opportunity to learn more about how our young ones learn, right? So parents now have insight. Dexter, you talked about realizing that kids need socialization at the age that your kids are, more so than learning the ABCs right now, right? So that light bulb may or may not have been there if you were sending them to daycare and everything was fine. So parents do have some data that they can tap into their own data and say, oh, my child works best in this environment. And so now we can plan for that. And so hopefully that helps leaders as we continue to move down this path of the pandemic and, all the other issues that are happening. We are still having the uprising across our nation in the anti-racist movement. And, there's a chance of covert upticking again. So we're going to go through multiple crises, but we have data, we have experienced this, and we can use that information and apply it to the next 10 months, which is the school year.
That sounds like a nice key takeaway, Cynthia. We're closing in on the end of the show. That was lovely.
Thank you. I didn't even realize that.
No, it was great. I feel like every time we have an episode, we're like, we could continue this conversation forever. So, please come back and join us again. We close every show with a key takeaway. Peta, would you like to share yours?
My key takeaway is that each of these systems that we've discussed today, employment, arts, education, childcare, mental health care, right? That individuals and families have all of these needs simultaneously, and we have systems that have been mostly meeting them. But at this moment in history, they're kind of being teased apart and becoming more apparent. And maybe there is an opportunity here to think more deeply, more holistically about what these needs are and whether they have really been getting met in the right places.
Yeah.
I like that. Dexter, have you got a takeaway to leave us with today?
Well, one thing that this pandemic has done for me personally is it's brought me closer to my family, because we're around each other all the time, for days on end, and so it's really made me rethink unconditional love that we give to our family, that we give to our friends, appreciating that when we can't hug or we can't shake hands, right, or be in close quarters. And I want to continue and encourage myself as well as all leaders to continue to deconstruct what we believe is the standard American dream, and to look at redefining what that is and putting family first in that.
Wow, I love that.
I love that. That's interesting. My takeaway is that, I just want to piggyback on Dexter. I love all this extra family time because we were going 100 miles an hour. And I hope that when we do reopen from COVID, whatever that looks like, we can hold on to exactly what you just mentioned, Dexter. That just being there with each other and relying on each other. So Mayra, would you like to close the show with your key takeaway?
So I guess my key takeaway is me time, right? Because that is what I have learned to appreciate. Just taking walks by myself, or just taking a moment to, no one's on top of me and no one's asking me so many questions. And I get the opportunity to take my time to think about that email, because I'm usually quick. If someone annoys me, I'm usually quick about clicking send to my rebuttal. But so now I have the opportunity to just sort of, just really have me time. And I've learned to appreciate the alone time. And sometimes it's frustrating, but for the most part, I've learned to appreciate it. And like Dexter, I want to be able to continue this afterwards, just to not forget that we have the whole family kinship, and don't lose that, because that's really important.
Yeah, I do want to add, and I know Mayra was closing the show, but I'm really struck by this concept that Mayra highlighted of, parents also need to be aware, not just has your child done homework, is it keeping up with the schoolwork, but there's a real emotional and social component to it that both Dexter and Mayra talked about, that parents need to be aware of, that we may not have had time in the last 4 or 5 months, but now will probably need to become a common practice. So that's important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You have a takeaway, Rebecca?
Well, I piggybacked off of Dexter. I love holding my babies tight through all of this. That's really been a special treat because we were always 100 miles an hour in a million directions. And I agree that this really, there's nothing more important in life than your family and humans that you interact with, right? So I want to hold on to this, not the pandemic, but I want to hold on to that ability to have more interactions during the day. This was a great episode. Mayra and Dexter, thank you so much for joining us on Coffee Time with Masterminds. We do hope you come back and join us next time for Coffee Time with Masterminds every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Bye,
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.